from one village to a central village. There was one clinic for 5 villages. And when you would go to that village, you would be lucky if they had Tylenol. That they subsidized that country by raising a workforce for apartheid with little government support or investment. And what I said to them after my first few shadowings was, you know, as long as you say you do nothing, then everybody else feels very comfortable saying you are doing nothing. That until and unless you recognize and value what it is that you give, no one else will recognize or value it. Because these women are the same women who are the first to step in times of crisis. That when a child loses her parents, it's not the international community that takes that child in. It is the women of that village who bring the child into their own family. When someone in their community is hungry, it is very rarely that the first responders are people from a government agency. The first to bring food and support are over and over the women of that village, poor as they are themselves. I grew up in the shadow of women. Women who were domestic workers in South Africa. Workers who were covered by no labor legislation and were therefore so often at the mercy of their employers. That they could be fired at the end of the month and sent away with no pay. That they had no right to vacation. And yet, these women who had, it seemed, no power, no resources, organized themselves into a labor union. And even as the government arrested leaders of that union, that each time a secretary general or a shop steward was named, all of a sudden that person would be thrown in jail or deported to the Bantustans. And yet, very soon, someone else arose to take her place. And on they struggled until they were fully recognized. I grew up in the shadow of women of Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, who struggled and fought with the men of their countries in their armed struggle. And then they said, you know, when the struggle was over and we had won our independence, the men said to us, we have our freedom, and yes, we're going to get to gender equality, but there are so many things that we need to do first. So many important things around food and education that could please just hold off on the gender stuff. We'll get to you. And those women said, you know, we believe them. And so when the end of apartheid came, they said to the women of South Africa, don't you dare allow gender issues to be put on the back burner. Because if you do, they will never be dealt with. And so the women of the African National Congress said, we insist that 50% of the electoral list be women. And they didn't win that, but they did win 1/3 of the electoral list. And just before the elections, actually, I was living in Connecticut and was asked to be part of a panel discussion about what were some of the issues that women, well, not just women, but that were facing South Africa as we moved into a democratic society.